Hello, I'm Hannah, and this is Hannah's Books. Welcome to another installment of this year's Hannah's Bookaka, where I post for all 8 nights of Hanukkah. Before I get started on the 7th night, I want to make sure you all know that the final video will be appearing not tomorrow afternoon, but at some point before sunset during the next day, soon before Hanukkah ends as the sun goes down. Or at least, that is my hope. I'm putting off the last video because tomorrow will be very busy, very happily busy for me. My son will be in town, and we have adventures with friends for much of the day tomorrow. I hope you will all be able to perhaps enjoy both some reading time as well as some time with friends and family as the new year arrives. Actually, I'm filming today's video very early this morning, and we'll schedule it to post this afternoon. Why, you ask? Well, my son will be flying to DC's airport this morning from his home in Boston, and I'm about to head downtown to meet him for some seasonal celebrations at a couple of our favorite spots in Washington. I will try to film some video footage to share with you at some point, possibly even for the final Bookaka video on the afternoon of the 2nd. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Today, I want to tell you about the wildest book I read this year. Something outside of my usual genres, but nevertheless something I think will be fascinating for readers of any genre. A bookish young friend of mine recommended it, not because it was outside my comfort zone, but because of a certain aspect of it that's very much in my comfort zone, or at least my areas of interest. Let me explain. The book is Everything for Everyone, an oral history of the New York Commune, 2032 to 2072, by Emmy O'Brien and Eman Abdelhadi, published in 2022. This novel is presented as a series of 12 interviews made by academics who publish them, complete with an introduction that sets the interviews in historical context. The interviewees, all very normal members of society, were involved in different ways with an anti-fascist revolution, with the twin goals of overthrowing capitalism and establishing a radical new social order, specifically in New York City, although societal reconstruction was also happening around the globe during these years. Many of the interviewees were young activists and community organizers, or on the margin of society in some way, and they were intent that the new social order would be far more inclusive than society was before the revolution. I mentioned that my friend lent me this book because of an interest of mine. My co-writer and I relied on many oral history interviews when we were putting together our academic history book. We were telling a specific narrative, not sharing the interviews specifically as interviews, but my young friend knew how intrigued I was by the use of oral history as scholars try to piece together what happened in the past. You'll notice that I said past. Oral histories are exactly that, histories, except when they appear as part of what is a speculative novel. Here, we're reading these interviews as if they were made in the past, that we, the readers, are looking back on the mid-21st century world. The two authors are certainly creating a future, but at the same time, they're actually very much addressing issues that we're facing today. The rampant spread of global capitalism, conflicts over changing ideas of gender identity and also bodily modification in other ways, the spread of deadly pandemics, indigenous struggles in the Americas, major tension in the Israel-Palestine region, the impact of religious cults, climate disasters, even the downfall of academia. In some ways, this book takes its cues from the popularity of dystopian fiction, especially dystopian YA fiction, as it lays out the destruction of society and the desperation of people to survive. It's also very clearly connected to utopian fiction. As I was reading, I kept thinking about the 2 parable books by Octavia Butler. While both books are absolutely rooted in the destruction of society, both are also really rooted in utopian reconstructions. Here in Everything for Everyone, we see the New York Commune trying to establish a better society, one that takes care of everyone, where we see our neighbors as family. I also think back to utopian books like Herland, a novel about an all-female society written by Charlotte Perkins Gilman and published in 1915, which I've mentioned a few times on this channel. Like the inhabitants of the New York Commune, the people in the feminist utopia have children outside of a traditional family structure, and they create a more peaceful society by committing not to relationships between couples, but to responsibility for all the people in the communes. Even more obvious as the ancestor of this novel, though, is a book written by textile artist William Morris, with even a somewhat similar title, kind of, News from Nowhere, published in 1890. Like the world of Everything for Everyone, Morris is writing about a world that functions without capitalism. His is a rural one rather than an urban one, but there are a lot of parallels in the two plots. Both books create ideal worlds that have completely separated from private ownership, and both no longer rely on the structure of marriage or the nuclear family to continue. But just because there is no marriage does not mean, in Morris's case, that Morris doesn't rely on traditional sexual divisions of labor. In that, he's very much an author of his time, the late 19th century. Still, he creates a society that supposedly relies far less on the subjugation of women than the society in which he lived. But what is most similar is that he's responding directly to the challenge of the spread of capitalism expanding in new ways in his own society. Just like the people in Everything for Everyone, the people in News from Nowhere create a society in response that relies not on capitalism but on socialism/communism. The biggest difference, other than the politics of when the books were written, is that Morris is writing about a pastoral world, while O'Brien and Abdelhadi are writing about an urban one. Another thing, Everything for Everyone is a work of not only speculative fiction, but of speculative scholarship. The two authors of this novel, who incidentally are the two interviewers in the plot, are interested in various theories of social formation and cultural identity. In almost every chapter, they address situations and issues that both activists and social scientists are trying to understand right now. In that, too, this is quite explicitly a political novel. Everything for Everyone is fascinating, both the way the book looks back at previous literature, how it considers real issues of today, and also how it imagines a way for humanity to survive and move forward. To be honest, I find it tremendously optimistic to believe that we'll be able to so quickly respond to all of the difficulties barreling toward us in real life. All of a sudden, because of a crisis, people are immediately willing to give up nuclear family and start to care for everyone around them. I don't think that will be an easy transition in real life, nor do I feel certain that that will actually work as intended. Another problem with the book is that there are times when I feel that the portrayal of various social politics is too curt and formulaic. We get a series of different characters being interviewed, and sometimes it feels like each one is created to raise a different social issue, not necessarily connected to the other stories, and not necessarily reflecting larger goals in the narrative. The author's reliance on the conceit of only reproducing the interviews rather than telling a narrative makes it hard to reconcile whatever contradictory ideas about society we might see in the 12 transcripts. In other words, fundamentally, I really didn't love this book, and I think it has quite a few flaws as a work of fiction. But I found it absolutely fascinating, perhaps more than any other book I read this year. And I would love to hear if any of you have read this book and what you think about it. Okay, I think that will do for this video. Thank you all so much for joining me today here on Hannah's Books. See you soon for the last video, the last day of Hannah's Bookaka. Not tomorrow afternoon, but the next day before sunset here, if at all possible. Happy New Year, everybody.